The fall sun bathed the streets of Appin in golden light, reflecting off the windows of the towering skyscrapers that loomed imposingly against the blue sky. In the heart of the financial district, Ben Gregg's, one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, was preparing to welcome its distinguished lunch patrons. John Carter, a young real estate tycoon, strode into the establishment with the confidence of a man accustomed to commanding every room he entered. His tailored Italian suit and Patek Philippe watch were understated, yet undeniable symbols of his status. However, a flicker of unease in his piercing blue eyes betrayed the otherwise polished image he projected. Seated discreetly at a corner table was Kendra Mike, a black woman of striking beauty and elegance. Her radiant skin was complemented by the vivid red dress she wore, and her eyes shone with a mix of anxiety and determination. As John approached, she rose gracefully to greet him, exchanging a quick, tense kiss. "Kendra," John began, his voice low and measured. What was so urgent that it couldn't wait until after work? Kendra drew a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for her bag. "John, I have something to show you," she said. Around them, the restaurant hummed with quiet sophistication. Waiters moved silently between tables, serving meticulously plated dishes and expensive wines. A middle-aged couple nearby animatedly discussed an upcoming trip to Italy, while a group of executives at a larger table shared hearty laughs over an inside joke. Amid this refined bustle, no one seemed to notice the silent storm brewing in the corner. Kendra finally pulled a small object from her bag and placed it on the table. John's gaze dropped, and his face turned pale as he recognized it. A pregnancy test. 2 bright pink lines stared back at him, unmistakable and condemning. I'm pregnant, John," Kendra whispered, her voice barely audible over the soft clatter of cutlery and muted conversations. Time seemed to stop for John. The carefully constructed world he had built began to crumble. Scenarios of scandalous headlines, disapproving glances from colleagues, and his father's stern look of disappointment flashed through his mind in rapid succession. This can't be happening," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "We were careful. You said you were on the pill." Kendra winced at the implicit accusation in his tone. But you know no method is 100% effective. "John, I know this wasn't in our plans, but..." "Plans?" John interrupted, his voice rising slightly. He glanced around nervously before leaning in closer. "Kendra, we didn't even have plans. This was just an adventure." His words struck Kendra like a physical blow. She straightened, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "An adventure?" she repeated, her voice trembling. "Is that what I am to you? After everything we've shared these past few months?" John ran a hand through his hair, the tension etched into every line of his face. "You know what I mean, Kendra. Think about it. You work for me. You know who I am, my family, my business. This would ruin everything." Kendra stared at him, disbelief and hurt etched into her features. "And what exactly do you suggest I do, John? This isn't just about you or your precious reputation. There's a life growing inside me. Our life." The silence that followed was deafening, the weight of their conversation hanging heavy between them while the elegant buzz of the restaurant continued, oblivious to the storm at their table. The restaurant continued its elegant rhythm of business lunches and social gatherings, oblivious to the drama unfolding in its midst. John looked at the pregnancy test again, as if willing it to magically change if he stared hard enough. Finally, he spoke, his voice cold and distant. I need time to think. This is too much to process right now." With those words, he stood abruptly, almost knocking over his chair. Without looking back, John left the restaurant in haste, leaving Kendra alone with the pregnancy test and a broken heart. Frozen in place, Kendra felt silent tears stream down her cheeks. She placed a protective hand over her still flat belly, a fierce determination slowly replacing the pain in her eyes. "Don't worry, little one," she whispered. "Mommy will take care of you, no matter what. John Carter's office on the 50th floor of a skyscraper in Appin offered a panoramic view of the city that never slept. But that afternoon, John barely noticed the urban spectacle before him. His gaze was fixed on a distant point, as his mind swirled with conflicting thoughts. The phone on his desk rang for the 5th time in an hour. He glanced at the caller ID, Kendra. Letting out a heavy sigh, John ignored the call, allowing it to go to voicemail. The silence that followed was deafening. "Mr. Carter?" His assistant's voice snapped him back to the present. "Your family is waiting for you at the restaurant. Your brother's engagement dinner, remember?" John muttered a soft curse under his breath. He had completely forgotten. "Thanks, Stella. Tell the driver I'll be down in 5 minutes." As he gathered his things, a bitter irony struck him. His younger brother was about to announce his engagement to a senator's daughter, a match his father had praised as strategically perfect. Meanwhile, John was harboring a secret that could shatter everything his family had built. In the car on the way to Perry, one of New York's most exclusive restaurants, John finally listened to Kendra's voicemail. "John, please, we need to talk. We can't just ignore this. I need to know what you're thinking, what we're going to do. Call me, please." Her voice, filled with a mix of fear and hope, made his stomach twist with guilt. Closing his eyes, John recalled their moments together. Kendra wasn't just an employee or a fleeting affair. She was intelligent, compassionate, and possessed a quiet strength he deeply admired. Yet, the looming consequences of their situation left him paralyzed with fear. At the restaurant, the Carter family was gathered in a private room. Sam Carter, the patriarch, was an imposing man with gray hair and piercing eyes. He raised an eyebrow as John arrived. "John, how nice of you to join us," Sam said, his tone making it clear the tardiness had not gone unnoticed. Dinner unfolded as expected, a blend of business talk and high society gossip. Victor, John's younger brother, and his fiancée, Tricia, were the center of attention, with wedding plans and political alliances dominating the conversation. "What about you, John?" his mother, Helen, asked during a lull. "When are we going to see you settle down with a nice girl?" John nearly choked on his wine. "Mom, you know I'm focused on expanding the company right now." "Nonsense," his father interjected. "A man in your position needs a suitable wife. I'm sure we can arrange some promising introductions." Sam's words echoed in John's mind, blending with the memory of Kendra's voicemail. Two realities collided, two lives that seemed impossible to reconcile. As the evening ended and farewells were exchanged, Sam pulled John aside. "Son, you seem distracted. Is there something you want to tell me?" For a moment, John considered confessing everything, but fear won out. "No, Dad, just work stress," he lied. Sam nodded, though he didn't appear entirely convinced. "Remember, John, our family has a reputation to uphold. Don't do anything to embarrass us." The words weighed heavily on John as he drove home. In his penthouse overlooking Central Park, John poured himself a whiskey and gazed out at the sparkling city below. Millions of lives were unfolding, each with its own course. With trembling hands, he picked up his phone and typed a message to Kendra. "Meet me tomorrow at the office at 7 a.m. We need to talk." After hitting send, John felt a mix of relief and dread. He knew the decision he would make the next morning could change the course of many lives. With one last sip of whiskey, he braced himself for a restless night, knowing dawn would bring a moment of truth. The sun had barely risen when Kendra arrived at the imposing Carter Enterprises building. The usually bustling lobby was quiet, with only a few cleaning staff preparing for the day. Nervously, Kendra adjusted the strap of her handbag as she stepped into the elevator. Her reflection in the mirrored walls revealed dark circles under her eyes, silent evidence of a sleepless night. Taking a deep breath, she tried to steady her racing heart. On the 50th floor, John was already waiting. He stood by the window, gazing out at the New York skyline. Hearing the door open, he turned slowly. Kendra, he said, his voice controlled but tinged with tension. John, she replied, her tone steady as she met his gaze. I'm here, as you asked. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken words and restrained emotions. John gestured toward the chairs. Please sit. Kendra obeyed, her eyes never leaving his. John remained standing, his hands buried in his pockets, clearly uncomfortable. Kendra, I've thought a lot about our situation, he began, carefully choosing his words. You have to understand, this isn't easy for me. And you think it's easy for me? Kendra retorted, her voice trembling slightly. John, I didn't plan this, but it happened, and now we have to deal with it together. John closed his eyes briefly, as though summoning courage. When he opened them again, there was a coldness in his gaze that Kendra had never seen before. There can't be an U.S., Kendra. Not in this situation. The word struck Kendra like a punch to the stomach. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. What are you saying, John? I'm saying I can't be the father of this child. My family, my position, everything I built would be at risk. Kendra stared at him in disbelief. So that's it? You're just going to abandon us? Like we're a mistake you can erase? John turned his eyes away, unable to face the hurt in hers. I can provide financial assistance. Discreetly, of course. But that's the most I can offer. Financial assistance? Kendra repeated, her voice rising. Do you think you can buy your way out of this? You can just throw money at the problem and walk away. John moved toward her, his tone pleading. Kendra, please understand. I'm trying to do what's best for all of us. No, Kendra shouted, stepping back. What's best for you, John? Not for me. Not for this baby. Tears began to roll down her face, but her eyes burned with anger. I thought what we had was special, that you were different. John felt a pang in his chest, but fear rooted him in place. Kendra, I'm sorry. I really am, but I can't be the man you need me to be. Kendra stared at him, seeing not the man she had once loved, but a stranger, frightened and selfish. She grabbed her bag with a quick motion. You're right, John. You can't be that man because that man doesn't exist. She headed for the door, but paused with her hand on the handle. Without turning around, she spoke one last time. I don't need your money. I don't need anything from you. I'm going to raise this child on my own, and they'll know what real love and courage are. Something you clearly don't understand. With that, Kendra walked out, leaving John alone with the weight of his decision. The sound of the door closing echoed through the empty office, sealing their fate. John sank into his chair, his head in his hands. He had made his choice, but the cost was greater than he had ever imagined. Time marched on, indifferent to the lives it altered. In a modest Bronx neighborhood, Kendra Mike woke to the sound of children's laughter. Smiling, she stayed in bed for a moment, savoring the joy. When she got up, she found her 4-year-old daughter, Priscilla, playing energetically in the next room. Good morning, my love, Kendra said, scooping Priscilla into a hug. Priscilla, with her dark curls and sparkling eyes, was the image of her mother, with just a hint of John in her smile. Mommy, is today the big day? Priscilla asked, bouncing with excitement. Kendra nodded, pride swelling in her chest. Yes, darling. Today, we opened the new community center. As they prepared for the day, Kendra reflected on the journey that had brought her here. After leaving Carter Enterprises, she had faced months of struggle and uncertainty, but adversity had only strengthened her resolve. With the support of friends and her community, Kendra thrived. She returned to school, earned a degree in social work, and dedicated herself to helping single mothers and vulnerable families. Her nonprofit organization was the culmination of her efforts, and the community center they were opening that day was her proudest achievement. Across town, in a luxurious apartment overlooking Central Park, John Carter prepared for another day. His reflection in the mirror showed a man of success, but his eyes betrayed the regret and loneliness he carried. In the past 5 years, John had expanded the family business and solidified his reputation as a corporate powerhouse. Outwardly, he seemed to have it all, but inside, he felt an emptiness no professional victory could fill. His phone rang, pulling him from his thoughts. It was his mother, Helen. "John, darling, don't forget dinner tonight. Your father has an important announcement to make." "I'll be there, Mom." "Don't worry," John replied, sighing. After ending the call, he picked up the morning paper. A small article in the community section caught his eye. New support center opens in the Bronx. Kendra Mike's name listed as the founder of the new community center made John's heart leap. For a fleeting moment, he considered going there to see, even from afar, what Kendra had built. But fear, the same fear that had led him to push her away years ago, held him back. Meanwhile, in the Bronx, Kendra and Priscilla arrived at the bustling downtown area. A small, joyful crowd had already gathered, their faces radiating hope and excitement. Among them, neighbors, friends, and coworkers greeted Kendra warmly. Mrs. Mike, a young mother holding a baby, approached her, tears of gratitude glistening in her eyes. "We couldn't have done this without you. This place is going to change so many lives." Kendra smiled, deeply touched. "That's what we do. We support each other and rise together." As she prepared to give her opening speech, Kendra's gaze rested on Priscilla. The little girl watched everything with wide, curious eyes, her face glowing with pride. In that moment, Kendra knew she had made the right choice. The path had been far from easy, but every step had led her exactly where she needed to be. With Priscilla by her side and an entire community behind her, Kendra felt invincible. The future, once shrouded in uncertainty, now sparkled with possibilities. As she cut the ribbon to cheers and shouts of joy, Kendra realized this was just the beginning of something truly extraordinary. "I know," John interrupted. "I know I don't have the right to ask for anything, but Kendra, please give me a chance to make things right, to get to know my daughter." The silence that followed was heavy, laden with years of unresolved hurt and unrealized possibilities. Kendra looked at Priscilla, who was laughing with the other students, then back at John. "This isn't a decision I can make alone, John," she finally said. "And it's certainly not one I'm going to make here and now. I need to think about what's best for Priscilla." John nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "I respect that. Can I at least give you my number for when you're ready to talk?" Kendra hesitated but eventually agreed. As they exchanged contact information, they both knew that this unexpected encounter had opened a door that had long been closed. What would come next was uncertain, but one thing was clear. John, Kendra, and Priscilla's lives were about to change drastically once again. Autumn in New York was in full force, the trees in Bronx Park displaying an explosion of colors. Kendra walked slowly along the park's paths, with Priscilla skipping ahead, collecting colorful leaves. "Look, Mom, this one looks like fire," Priscilla exclaimed, holding up a bright red maple leaf. Kendra smiled, but her mind was far away. Ever since her unexpected encounter with John at the school reunion, she had found herself plunged into a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. Anger, confusion, and a treacherous hint of hope fought for dominance in her heart. "Mom!" Priscilla's voice brought her back to the present. "Are you sad?" Kendra knelt down, getting level with her daughter's eyes. "No, sweetheart. Just thinking about the man from school." Priscilla frowned, thoughtful. "He seemed to make you sad." Kendra hugged her daughter, feeling a wave of love and protection. "Sometimes, darling, people from our past can bring back complicated memories. But don't worry, okay? Mommy's fine." Meanwhile, across town, John was sitting in his office at Carter Enterprises, staring at his phone. Kendra's number was on the screen, his finger hovering over the call button. A knock on the door startled him. It was his father, Sam. "John, we need to talk," Sam said, his tone grave. John put the phone away, trying to hide his agitation. "Of course, Dad. What's wrong?" Sam sat up, his piercing eyes fixed on his son. You've been acting strange lately, distracted. And now I hear rumors that you've been seen in the Bronx, from all over the city. John felt his stomach sink. He should have known nothing would escape his father's network of contacts. I was just exploring some charity opportunities, John lied, hating himself for it. Sam studied him for a long moment. John, you're the future of this company. You can't afford distractions, especially not indiscretions from the past. John's blood ran cold. What are you talking about? Don't make a fool of me, son, Sam growled. I know about the girl, Kendra, Mike, and the child. John stood up abruptly, his chair creaking against the floor. How do you know? I've always known, Sam said, his voice cold. I thought you'd resolved this situation years ago. Clearly, I was wrong. Anger bubbled up inside John. Dad, we're talking about my daughter. A daughter you chose not to acknowledge. Sam snapped. And for good reason. Think of the scandal, John. The damage it would do to the company. To our family. John stared at his father, seeing him truly for the first time. The man he had always admired and feared now seemed small, petty. Maybe the company, the family, need a bit of scandal. A little humanity. Sam stood up, his face red with anger. Don't be silly, John. You have responsibilities, a legacy to uphold. But John was no longer listening. His gaze fell on a photo on his desk. Himself, younger, smiling next to his father on a golf course. The image of success and privilege now seemed empty, meaningless. I think I need to redefine what legacy means, Dad, John said quietly. As Sam continued to talk, threatening and arguing, John picked up his phone with clarity he hadn't felt in years. He typed a message to Kendra. Can we talk? I'm ready to do the right thing for Priscilla, for all of us. As the message was sent, John felt a huge weight lift from his shoulders. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, he felt hopeful. Prospect Park in Brooklyn was full of families enjoying a rare, sunny fall day. Among them, Kendra and Priscilla were walking hand in hand, the tension evident on Kendra's face, contrasting with her daughter's innocent animation. Mom, why are we here? It's not our normal park, Priscilla asked, her curious eyes observing the unfamiliar surroundings. Kendra took a deep breath, searching for the right words. Remember that man we met at school? John? Well, he wanted to talk to us today. Priscilla's eyes widened with interest. Is he a friend of yours? It's complicated, dear, Kendra replied, feeling the weight of years of secrets and difficult decisions. In the distance, they spotted John sitting on a bench, looking as nervous as Kendra felt. When he saw them, he stood up, a hesitant smile on his face. Kendra, Priscilla, he greeted, his voice trembling slightly. Thank you for coming. Kendra nodded stiffly, while Priscilla looked from one adult to the other, feeling the tension in the air. Priscilla, John began, kneeling down to be at the girl's eye level. I have something very important to tell you. Kendra's heart raced. They had discussed it over the phone, but seeing him about to reveal the truth made it all seem terribly real. A long time ago, John continued softly, your mother and I met. Well, I'm your father. The silence that followed was deafening. Priscilla looked at John, then at Kendra, her young mind processing the information. But you were never here, Priscilla finally said, her voice small and confused. The pain on John's face was palpable. I know, and I'm sorry about that. I made a very big mistake by not being present in your life, but I'm here now, if you give me a chance. Kendra watched the interaction, her heart breaking for her daughter's confusion and John's obvious guilt. Part of her wanted to protect Priscilla, to get her away from this man who had abandoned them, but another part recognized the courage it must have taken for John to be there. Why now? Kendra asked, unable to contain the question that had tormented her. John stood up, facing Kendra. Because I finally realized how wrong I was, how much I lost, and because I want to do the right thing, even if it's late. Priscilla, still processing everything, tugged on Kendra's sleeve. "Mom, does this mean I'll have a father now?" The innocent question hit Kendra like a punch in the gut. She knelt down, hugging Priscilla. "Darling, it's not that simple. We need to talk about this a lot. All of us." John nodded, respecting Kendra's caution. "I understand that I can't just walk into your lives and expect everything to be fine, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn a place here." The rest of the afternoon passed in a mixture of tense conversations and moments of hesitant connection. Priscilla, although confused, was curious about this new father in her life. Kendra watched every interaction with a mixture of apprehension and reluctant hope. As the sun began to set, tinting the Brooklyn sky with shades of orange and pink, the three of them prepared to leave. John knelt down again in front of Priscilla. "Can I give you a hug?" he asked softly. Priscilla looked at Kendra, who nodded slightly. The hug was brief and awkward, but charged with emotion. As Kendra and Priscilla walked away, John watched them go, his heart filled with a mixture of regret for lost time and hope for the future. He knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time in years, he felt he was heading in the right direction. Winter came to New York with unexpected ferocity. A snowstorm paralyzed the city, turning the streets into silent white corridors. In Kendra's apartment in the Bronx, the warmth of the heater contrasted with the coldness that had settled between her and John. "You can't just show up and expect to take Priscilla to spend Christmas with your family," Kendra exclaimed, her voice shaking with a mix of anger and fear. "She hardly knows you, John." John ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I know, Kendra, but they're her family too. My parents. They want to meet her." "Your parents?" Kendra laughed bitterly. "The same ones who made you leave me 10 years ago." The silence that followed was heavy with years of unresolved hurt. In the next room, Priscilla pretended to sleep, but every word seeped through the thin walls of the apartment. "I've made mistakes, Kendra," John said finally, his voice low. "Terrible mistakes, but I'm trying to make things right now." Kendra stared at him, years of struggle and loneliness reflected in her eyes. "What if it can't be fixed, John? What if it's too late?" Before John could answer, a scream from Priscilla's room interrupted them. They both rushed in, finding the girl sitting on her bed, tears streaming down her face. "Priscilla, honey, what's wrong?" Kendra asked, sitting down next to her daughter. Between sobs, Priscilla managed to say, I don't want you to fight over me." Kendra's heart broke at her words. John, standing in the doorway, looked equally devastated. "Oh, my love," Kendra said, hugging Priscilla tightly. "It's not your fault. None of this is your fault." John approached hesitantly, kneeling beside the bed. "Priscilla, your mother's right. We adults sometimes complicate things, but it's not your fault." Spring arrived in New York, bringing with it the promise of renewal. In Central Park, the cherry trees were in full bloom, their pink petals drifting gently in the breeze. Kendra, John, and Priscilla walked together along the park's winding paths, an unlikely trio united by love and time. Priscilla ran ahead, her laughter echoing through the air, while Kendra and John followed, their steps in hesitant sync. "I still can't believe she won the school essay competition," Kendra said, watching Priscilla with pride. John smiled, his eyes twinkling. "She has your intelligence and determination, Kendra, and your passion for social justice." Kendra looked at John, noticing the subtle changes in him over the last few months. The arrogant, fearful man she had met years ago had given way to someone more humble and compassionate. "You played a part in that too," Kendra admitted softly. "Your support for the community center, the writing classes you gave, it made a big difference." John stopped and turned to face her. "Kendra, I want to thank you for giving me a second chance, for allowing me to be a part of your lives." Kendra felt a lump in her throat. The last few months hadn't been easy. There had been arguments, misunderstandings, moments of doubt. But there had also been laughter, discoveries, and slowly, the building of trust. It wasn't easy, she said honestly. There were times when I wanted to give up, to send you away. John nodded, understanding. I know, and I would have understood if you had. But Kendra continued. Seeing you with Priscilla, seeing how you've changed, it meant a lot. Before John could reply, Priscilla came running back, her eyes shining with excitement. Mom, Dad, look what I found, she exclaimed, showing a small white flower in her hand. The use of the word Dad was still new, and it still made John's heart leap. He knelt down, examining the flower with exaggerated interest. Wow, that's beautiful, Priscilla. Do you know what this flower is? He asked. Priscilla frowned thoughtfully. No, but it looks special. Kendra joined them, recognizing the flower. It's a wild daisy, dear. They're hardy. They grow in unlikely places, like us. John said softly, looking at Kendra and Priscilla. Like us? The moment was interrupted by the sound of John's phone. He pulled it out of his pocket, his face turning serious as he saw the name on the screen. It's my dad, he said to Kendra, who nodded in understanding. John answered, stepping aside to speak. Kendra and Priscilla watched tense. John's relationship with his family had been tumultuous ever since he decided to publicly acknowledge Priscilla. When he returned, there was a hesitant smile on his face. They want to invite us for lunch next weekend. All of us, he said. Kendra felt a wave of anxiety, but seeing the hope in John's eyes and the curiosity in Priscilla's, she nodded. I think we can try. Sensing the importance of the moment, Priscilla took both her parents' hands. Let's be like the daisy, she said. Strong no matter what. Kendra and John exchanged glances, years of history, pain, and hope passing between them in an instant. Yes, darling, Kendra said, squeezing Priscilla's hand. We'll be just like the daisy. As they walked back, the afternoon sun bathed the park in golden light. Kendra looked at John and Priscilla, feeling a wave of gratitude. The road ahead was still uncertain, full of challenges and possibilities. But for the first time in a long time, she felt truly hopeful about the future. Together, as an unlikely but resilient family, they walked toward a new chapter in their lives, ready to face whatever fate had in store for them. Priscilla looked at John, her eyes still full of tears. Are you leaving again? The question hit John like a punch in the gut. He looked at Kendra, seeking permission before answering. No, Priscilla, I'm not leaving. I promise, he said. He'll be here no matter what. Kendra felt a mixture of emotions when she heard these words. Part of her wanted to believe, while another part feared opening herself up to pain again. Can we be a family? Priscilla asked softly. Priscilla asked timidly. The silence that followed was deafening. Kendra and John exchanged glances, years of unspoken history passing between them. Finally, Kendra spoke. Priscilla, family. Family is complicated, but what matters is that we all love you very much. John nodded, adding softly, and we'll work together to do what's best for you, always. As they calmed Priscilla down, the storm outside began to subside. The first rays of the morning sun penetrated through the clouds, casting a soft glow on the freshly fallen snow. Kendra looked out of the window, then at John and Priscilla. Maybe, she thought, just like the storm, this difficult phase would also pass. And maybe, just maybe, something beautiful could rise from the ashes of the past. If you were in Kendra's place, would you be able to forgive John and allow him to be part of Priscilla's life after 10 years of absence? Why or why not? Leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.